Dear students, welcome back to a Digital Learning, an initiative by a Department of Collegiate and Technical Education, Government of Karnataka. Dear students, in the previous session, we learned about types of decision making. So in this session, we're going to learn about steps in decision making or a decision making process. The learning objective to learn about the process of decision making or steps in decision making. Session outcomes. At the end of the session, the students shall have a concept clarity and understanding with regard to a process of decision making. Is an important aspect of planning. The process of identifying and selecting a course of action from among various alternatives to solve a specific problem is a decision making. The process of decision making having a different steps or steps involved in a decision making. Defining the problem, first step. Next, collection of data. Next, analysis of problem. Development of criteria for a successful solution. Identification of resources. Finding the course of problem. Selection of alternative. Implement additions. And finally, follow up. Dear students, let us learn each of the steps in detail in the coming slides. First one, that is step one, defining the problem. First of all, it is necessary to search the environment for the existence of the problem. So defining the problem is the problem of solved. So sufficient timing should be spent on defining the problem. It is very difficult to define the problem. The manager is responsible for defining the problem. For example, like a doctor has to take into account all the symptoms before giving a medicine. A manager must carefully diagnose the problem and should tackle it tactfully. So it means, so what there is a when there is a deviation from the past experiences, and when there is a deviation from the plan, or when there is other people bring problems to the manager, when the competitors outperform the manager's organizations, is all you have to recognize and define the problem. Now, every problem should be correctly diagnosed. A manager should remember that the symptoms of a problem that he observes may sometimes mislead him. They may lead him to a suspect one part of the system or operation when in fact the defect may be hidden in another part which is perhaps less visible. For example, when the sales decline, the management may think that the problem is one of the poor selling procedures, sharp competition, or the saturation of old markets. But the real problem may be tight-fisted control of the firm and its consequential inability to move quickly enough to meet changes in a customer's demand. Hence, the efforts made by the management in other direction may not help in increasing sales. The second one, the collection of data. Once you define the problem, once you recognize the problem, then you have to collect the data. The information can be collected from internal sources as well as external sources. So internal sources means is already published in the sources that is within the organization. The external sources means outside the sources. Well, you collect the information from the outside the agencies. The right decisions depend upon the quality of information collected by the management. If you collected information from the wrong sources, the decisions will be wrong. that the right decisions cannot be taken if you collected a wrong material from the wrong sources. The right decisions depend upon the quality of the information collected by the management. Next step, the analysis of the problems. Just you define the problem, just collection the data, then you have to analyze. The subject to systematic study, depth information should collect it and should be classified properly. So information is based on facts, speculation, and assumption. And normally, the 98% information should be based on facts, 2% on speculation, and 0% on assumption. The manager makes sure that is correctly analyze the problem. So unfortunately, there is no simple answer. The same problem may be looked at it differently by different individuals, having different backgrounds, orientations, and trainings. However, one thing which can be said for certain is that the manager should follow this system to careful analyzing a problem. So he must make a thorough study of all the subparts of his organization which are connected with the subpart in which the problem seems to be located by the students. The third step is that analysis of the problems. We'll go to next step, finding a causes of problems. This is the most important aspect of the understanding the problem. This is a complicated process to find out the exact cause is very essential. For example, a decrease in the sales. You have to identify the reason. You have to identify the cause. Why the sales is decreases. Or why the production, if suppose production cost is increases, so you have to identify the cause. Why the production cost is rapidly increases. You have to find out the causes. Next step is the identification of resources. It is necessary to identify the available resources in the organization and the use of resources for achievements of the organization goals. The management must make the list of resources that are available for solving a problem. So one of the important steps, the decision making. Next, a development of a criteria for successful solution. It means the criteria should not be established as early as possible. It should take strong decisions. So this criteria is useful for choosing the best alternative and divert the resources accordingly. So this criteria is divided into must and want, but the must criteria are satisfied first and want criteria later on. So development of alternatives. So development of alternatives is the most important step in the process of decision making by students. The effectiveness in a decision making depends upon development of alternatives. See, my dear students, so when the two managers can think exactly alike, you cannot. The testimonies of investors and great scientists indicate that the creative process consists of the five stages. First of all, the manager must make himself thoroughly familiar with the problem. This is called a saturation. Next, he must think of the problem from several viewpoints. This is called deliberation. Then, if there is no fruitful results of deliberation, he must temporarily turn off the conscious search and relax. This is called incubation. The next stage called illumination. A flash of insight may take a place and the manager may get some good ideas. The last stage called accommodation. The manager refines his ideas into a usable proposal. As with many other human abilities to students, some managers have more creativeness than others. In any case, the manager who is working under permissive conditions is far more likely to produce original ideas than his counterpart who is working under conservative conditions. Moreover, under permissive conditions, a group of individuals seems to generate new ideas faster than a single individual. One popular group technique is brainstorming. The ideal brainstorming group consists of 5 to 10 people. The basic idea behind brainstorming is to think of as many alternatives as possible without pausing to evaluate them. Some people, however, assert that creativity being a more intuitive than logical. Dear students, after having diagnosed the problem, the next step is to alternative solutions. The development of alternatives is the most important step in the process of decision making. The effectiveness in decision making depends upon development of the alternatives. Selection of alternatives. In order to select the best alternative, the following points should be considered: the risk, economy, time, availability of resources. Next, implementation of decisions. So implementation means putting the selective alternative into action. The process of implementation starts with assigning the responsibilities. The management must focus on the duties of the person. You must consider the following points while taking decisions. That is effective communicator, there is effective communication, the time for decision making, and acceptance by an employee. So the managers should be accepted by the employees. So otherwise, the employee won't listen his words. So that finally, sometimes the manager, in spite of his best efforts, may not make a correct decision. So that while converting a decision into effective action, should institute a system of follow-up so that he can modify or alter his decision at the earliest opportunity. So, dear students, in this session, we have learned the steps involved in a decision making, a process of a decision making. So, I hope so you enjoyed the class. The references. Thank you so much, my dear students, for watching the video.